man on his own donkey, brought him to in and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, that sum of the currency. I think it's one is equal to a day's wages, and gave them to the innkeeper. So just translating this into modern English, he took out $500 and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you have. So I highlighted this in bold because when you're building things in the principle of love, you help somebody without asking how much it costs. He didn't ask how much it would cost, he just helped the person. Love does not ask about the expense when somebody is in need. Likewise, with respect to refugees, we as a society must not be primarily concerned with the expense incurred in life-saving treatment. So again to the philosophy, which is sometimes confusing. Natural law, law and morality. According to natural law theorists such as Aquinas, Grotius, Dworkin, and Finney, the law must be grounded in morality to be valid. So Dworkin, we only Dworkin worksheet in law faculty, like last week. Dworkin, the correct legal principle is the one that makes the law the moral best it can be. So, well, my favorite school of legal philosophers will side with this guy. Law and morality is united. Not to teach anybody head in law faculty, we also teach something called positivism, which basically says law is just a bunch of rules backed by a sanction, and anything can be a law once it's validly passed. And I always teach my students, yes, if you want to be a positivist, that's okay, but keep in mind that if you're a positivist, apartheid was okay, Mandela was wrong, slavery was okay. You get the picture. Law and morality separate, you get some very absurd societies built without law and morality. So once you have law and morality fused, you get this wonderful thing called civil disobedience. According to Martin Luther King Jr., one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. So, just laws, we must obey them. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey just laws. Unjust laws, sorry. And thanks for that. I was just thinking about how many times he went to jail. The KKK blew up his house 2 to 3 times. They assassinated him in the end. So that's the consequences of going all out with disobeying unjust laws. But we have a better world because of civil disobedience. Once you understand that there's a higher, the whole idea of natural law is there's a higher moral law which we have to obey, no matter what the Minister of Health says, right? And I'm not a doctor, so you can't mean nothing. I would like to formally commend all doctors who have broken government policy in order to save the lives of migrants and refugees. So yeah, so you all are on the moral high ground. Yes. Right to health. The right to health is a fundamental part of our human rights and of our understanding of a life in dignity. The right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to give its full name, is not new. Internationally, it was first articulated in the 1946 Constitution of the World Health Organization, whose preamble defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So mental and social well-being includes mental health care, includes everything we need to be a productive person. The preamble further states that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health care is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, which includes all migrants, all refugees, regardless of their ethnicity and their background, without distinction of race. Bear with me for a second. Race, religion, political belief, or economic or social condition. Economic and social condition covers refugees. The 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights also mentions health as part of an adequate standard of living in Article 25. The right to health was again recognized as a human right in the 1966 International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. This is from reliable source, Office of the United Nations, High Commission of Refugees. High Commission of Human Rights, sorry. Right to Health fact sheet. I keep going to the High Commission of Refugees conferences, so I just, yeah. High Commissioner for Human Rights, Right to Health fact sheet. Slide 10. 1967 Convention and Protocol relating to the status of refugees. So Trinidad has signed this convention. We have ratified the convention but not produced any legislation to incorporate it in our domestic law. So just a brief plug, I think I'll get to it later on in this speech, a brief plug on international law. How our system works is that once you sign a treaty, it's not binding in the country until you bring it home, do legislation and pass it through the Senate and through the House, and then the President sign it. Other countries, once you sign a treaty, it automatically becomes law. So doing actual research, I call lawyers who deal with refugees. The only policy we have is a 2014 draft document entitled A Phased Approach Towards the Establishment of a National Policy to Address Basically, we have a halfway draft thing that nobody touched since 2014. So since, since like 2 Olympics ago, 1 World Cup ago, a long time ago. And also this document does not deal with healthcare concerns, as it is only a draft. And at the time, we did not have 40,000 people in the country. So this convention, Article 20, where a rationing system exists which applies to the population at large and regulates the general distribution of products in short supply, example antibiotics, all the other healthcare stuff I don't understand that you all know about, in short supply, refugees should be accorded the same treatment as nationals. So we signed this into law, and the last 2 governments have been sticking to pass it properly, as it were. And this is what the convention says. We are bound by this in international law. If it's in short supply, refugees shall be accorded the same treatment. So no discrimination, right? Article 23, public relief. Contracting states shall accord to refugees lawfully staying in their territory the same treatment with respect to public relief and assistance as is according to their nationals. So again, well, this covers kind of welfare and other social programs, but I believe, well, I have a lawyer friend there, that I'm not asking you anything, that we try some innovative ways to interpret pieces of legislation to make it mean what we need it to mean, right? I would try, if I was in a case and this was passed in law, I'd try to make this mean healthcare. It's not an impossible interpretation. Depends on what the judge, is mooded to support on that day. Slide 11. International Convention, International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. So Article 12 states, the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. So as I drink this water, I take a short breather, just to give context to international law. So there would be like dozens of UN conventions on different topics, and then like the same fact book I referenced before, that would be based on, you'll go through each article at each convention on the topic as in health. You stitch it all together, and that would be the binding the interpretation of the international law on health. So that's why I have to go from 1967, 1966. They were passed through the UN on different topics, and then the 1 or 2 clauses to deal with health. So that, not trying to be pedantic, this is just how law is. It's all over the place. Any questions?
Not yet.
Article 12. The steps, part 2, the steps to be taken by the state parties to the present covenant to achieve the full realization of this right shall include those necessary for A. Provision for the reduction of the stillbirth rate and of infant mortality, and for the healthy development of the child. So we have somebody in pediatrics.
Pediatrics involved.
Are we accepting refugees? the improvement of all aspects of environmental and industrial hygiene. Well, this would deal with refugee rights on the workplace as well. So I'm not sure how much of the scope of your organization deals with workplace issues, but we all know that a lot of refugees are working in questionable conditions as well. So the government has supposed to have something in place to try and ensure that they have decent industrial hygiene. The prevention, treatment, and control of endemic, occupational, and other diseases. The creation of conditions which would assure all medical service and medical attention in the event of sickness. So, would you say this more or less covers most healthcare?
Yeah.
Yes? Or basically everything? This is just one of several conventions. Slide. Again, this is the list of all the various international conventions and covenants that cover aspects of healthcare. The 1967 International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. We have some politicians who need to read this. One of them has a party that's orange, needs to read this. No, he could try to sue me, I could survive, but I have evidence of it. So Article 5E, yeah, I'm that guy who says this. Article 5E, part 5.4. So, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, 1966 International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Article 12, we just read that. The 1979 Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, Articles 11.1, F, 12, and 14. So all the feminists, you have a whole treaty just for you. The 1989 Covenant on the Rights of the Child, Article 24, that's for the person in pediatrics. The 1990 International Covenant on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families, Articles 28, 43E, and 45C. So I'm not sure Trinidad signed this one, but regardless, there's another principle in international law that once something becomes customary, regardless if you didn't sign the treaty, if everybody's practicing it, it becomes called a jurisprudence, or it's a principle that binds everybody everywhere on the planet, regardless if you want it or not.
Okay, because I was not going to ask if are these a situation where we have signed to them but they haven't gone through our law system to be fully enacted locally as, or like how you was explaining
well,
previously.
some of these broad ones like economic and social rights, it's hard to enact all of that, and they're very broad, so you have to then decide what policy would be best to give effect to the right to healthcare, the right to life, right, all the rights. You can't just, I'll explain later when you get to the Constitution. The Constitution kind of mirrors a lot of rights as well, so you don't need to go and reenact more rights when we have constitutional rights.
Right.
But you can read those rights into your Constitution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the United States also a part of this?
A lot of them, but again, I don't have Wi-Fi to go and research.
Because
but
I'm looking at the migrant workers, I'm looking at if the states also ratifies this. What is the position with
Trump?
Yeah.
Oh, so how international law works is that normal law, for the law to be enforced, you have a sanction, as in Gary Griffith, police, you get locked up, you go apply for bail, you have a trial, if you lose a trial, you go to jail. That's a sanction. That is the forced enforcement of the law, which we don't do that well in Trinidad as yet. For international law, if you're a superpower with nuclear weapons, nobody telling you what to do, it doesn't matter. That's the part of international law that small countries like us